Welcome to Phosphorus Live. This is our bi-weekly look at the very interesting world of xIoT, the extended Internet of Things. I'm your host, Mike Huckaby. I'm the head of go-to-market enablement here at Phosphorus, and I'm joined by our device-obsessed director of sales engineering, James McCarthy, who, by the way, is celebrating his 2-year anniversary with Phosphorus today. Congrats, James.
Thank you. Thank you. 2 years went by quicker than I was expecting. We'll say that.
And here's to another 2 years to come. So we're happy to have you join us. Now, we get together like this every 2 weeks to provide some education on the connected devices that we all use to run our businesses on these days, and to give some insight into what Phosphorus does to help keep those devices secure. We have a simple format. We have a quick discussion on a specific topic, and then a Phosphorus technical take related to that topic. And it's a quick hit. It's 30 minutes. Today, we're going to do things just a little bit different because we have a special guest that will join us. But before we get to that, James, hey, what's been happening at the xIoT news desk?
Well, like everything in the IoT world, a lot of things are happening on a regular basis. Lots of news to talk through, but there's a couple here that I wanted to highlight. So, we do have some new research that's highlighting the critical vulnerabilities in a widely used Z-Wave chipset up to the 700 series that exposes millions of smart home and IoT devices to cyber threats. So attackers within radio range, can actually exploit the flaws so that they can do things like disrupt services, drain batteries, intercept data, and even potentially seize control of the devices. While the newer chipsets, the 500 and 700 series chipsets, you can fix this vulnerability with a firmware upgrade. The older models covering the 1, 2, and 300 series cannot be secured through updates. So they're just going to be, unfortunately, perpetually vulnerable to these threats. And so for me, that highlights two things. One is there's in the world of IoT, sometimes you just don't get the option to ever fix the problem. So at least understanding where these things are, where they are on your network, the risk they pose, and being able to highlight that can be really helpful. But it also highlights the fact that sometimes vulnerabilities have to get patched in these IoT devices, and it can get down to even the chip level. And so that's something that's really good to have that visibility for. At the same time, Checkpoint research has actually come out recently and stating that there's been about a 70% increase in cyber attacks on U.S. utilities companies this year as compared to the same time period last year. So this is, with the rapid digitalization of the power grid and the fact that it's exposing these critical systems to more and more vulnerabilities. It's more important now than ever to really be able to focus on and look at the vulnerabilities in your IoT or OT environment. Experts are warning that they actually underscored not only the urgent need for robust security in the infrastructure, but having the visibility into what's actually running at these different locations and having the process built and the process defined to actually go in and remediate that risk is more important now than ever. And that's it for the news.
Wow, and we've talked a bit about critical infrastructure and on this show here as well. And it's not surprising that we're getting that data back from organizations like Checkpoint. So it reminds us all that we have to pay attention in this realm. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so as organizations around the globe deal with this amazing growth of xIoT devices in their environments and getting started for those organizations to get on a path to becoming more secure can be absolutely daunting. So to help us with the discussion, we call from people to process to technology. We have very lucky to have Patrick Gillespie, the OT practice lead at GuidePoint Security, join us today. Hi, Patrick. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good to see you, Mike. Good to see you, James.
Now, we were just together a couple of weeks ago in Dallas. We got to present. I got to watch Patrick present. And I thought, one, just very, very interesting that you have a very diverse background to be able to bring to what you do today. So give us a little bit of what led you on your path to being the OT practice lead here at GuidePoint?
Yeah, really just lucky in the right place, right time, I guess. My career actually started off on the manufacturing side as a CNC programmer. Before I got into IT and architecture, ended up, doing a lot of automation, industrial controls, and architecture for a rail car manufacturing facility that made trains and parts for trains. So I did that for a long time before I got into pen testing, which is what led me to GuidePoint initially 2.5 years ago, was to come on board and help lead the red team, our awesome threat and attack simulation team at GuidePoint. And then we started getting OT work, and I don't know if I didn't say not it fast enough, or my industrial controls background. I said, well, I know what those things are, so I'll kind of lead it from the start. And then we just kept getting more work, and so we ended up building an official OT and IoT practice, and GuidePoint asked me to lead it. So I've eventually left the TAS team, and now, having a blast, building the OT practice and the team at GuidePoint.
Can you just so that the audience knows, can you tell us who GuidePoint is and what you guys do?
Yeah, GuidePoint Security is a cybersecurity VAR. So a VAR, for those that don't know, is a value-added reseller. So essentially, since our inception in 2011, we have focused on cybersecurity. There's hundreds of vendors out there that we've worked with over the years, on the IT side of things for cyber, right? Your firewalls, your identity access, IAM systems, your, vulnerability management, patch management, those kind of systems. So GuidePoint really is the best cybersecurity VAR there is. Kind of shameless plug there. We are essentially able to partner with our clients. We're vendor neutral, and we're able to help them figure out the best solutions for their environment from a cybersecurity perspective. Hope that kind of.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So you had a good pen testing background. You started doing pen testing here, and then you got moved into OT. I got to imagine that was a little bit of an odd jump. So if you're focused at security and pen testing, but then you have to go back to thinking about how do I apply security in an OT environment? That must have been very, very different to get your head around when you started there.
Yeah, it was, say, a big learning curve, because I left the railroad manufacturing industry in 2016 to go into purely consulting and pen testing. So essentially spent several years doing just that. I always liked the architecture, the defensive side of things, because that's where I started my career, right? Once I got into IT, I was a big, Cisco guy 20 years ago or whatever. And then, learning all the red team things, and you just get a different point of view, right? Which actually my Army Intel background kind of helped prep me for the social engineering and the pen testing, thinking like the enemy, because in Intel, we play the enemy. So the better we can portray the enemy's tactics and techniques, the better our operations and defenses are. So essentially, you're doing the same thing with red teaming. So really enjoyed learning the pen testing things. And once I came to GuidePoint, realized like there are so many people way smarter than I am. Like I was never a developer, or I never wrote my own exploits, that kind of thing, or found the bugs on the internet. But really transitioned into leadership with GuidePoint and GuidePoint's support. And then, so kind of switching back to OT, back to, very outdated operating systems, devices that can't have updates. It's just, it's really a pen tester's dream in a lot of environments that are when we do OT pen tests, depending on the environment. So, or the critical infrastructure, industry, some of them have different levels of maturity, but it was definitely a big definitely having to go back to my early days and things I used to do, and I never thought I'd go back to be honest.
I just, because everybody here is probably listening to you and going like, where's that accent from? Where's that person from? Where are you from, Patrick?
I'm actually from West Tennessee. So my wife's born and raised Arkansas. So came back from Afghanistan and moved to Arkansas. But before that, I spent 22 years outside of Memphis, Tennessee. So actually not quite, 2 or 3 hours from where y'all are headquartered.
Yeah, not too far away from Nashville, not 2 hours from Nashville. Okay, so where now once you started when you into the OT practice, you start working with organizations. Were you shocked at how unprepared those companies were to actually secure those environments?
Yeah, it was kind of I don't know, say flashback's the right word. So going from pen testing environments that are very mature, that do pen testing often. Some of them we do, pen testing as a service. We do, very, very much recurring pen testing to tighten down, especially like, Active Directory environments and those kind of things.
Hmm.
So it's going from those environments back to like the days I was in manufacturing, where in 2016 still, like, we made trains. So we put together trains. So we had tools and systems to test things like brakes. Brakes are pretty important on any moving object, especially a freight train. So our systems that tested the brakes ran on laptops that ran Windows 98. And again, this was 2016. Don't know if that's still in
Wow.
place today. That was a few years ago. So now coming back, back to seeing clients running Windows 98 and a ton of Windows XP, things that have been around for a very long time. So surprised, it just, I don't think surprise is the right word, but yeah, it was kind of, it's like, oh, I'm back in my old days of, trying to help figure out how to keep a Windows 98 box running or backed up or, protected essentially.
Now, when I saw you present, it was very interesting the way that you were breaking out where people should concentrate in regards to securing their environment. And what we've talked quite a bit about in xIoT security in the first place, it goes way beyond just tools. And a lot of times the tools aren't even the tools you're trying to use weren't even meant for an xIoT environment. So talk about when you start laying out programs for your customers, what are the things that you start to concentrate on?
Yeah, really, we start with the people. It's not technology defending your network, although the tools make defending your network much more efficient and can help with burnout of your people.
Hmm.
It starts with the people. So we tend to focus on your people, then your processes, then your technology. Because if you don't have if you don't have your people right, and everybody understands where we're headed and they know we're going that path together, it is very difficult to get all of the teams involved to secure OT and IoT, because you're not just dealing with IT anymore, like under
Hmm.
your CIO or under your CISO. Now you're dealing with people under your COO, your production, your plant managers, and then IoT. A lot of times you be dealing with physical security firms, right? For cameras and then printers typically still IT, but you have with IoT. I mean, IoT's all over IT and OT. So you have a lot of different asset owners. So yeah, so getting the people on the same page, because we have seen clients where they think a technology is going to fix their problems. They go, hear a sales pitch and it's like, oh, this is going to solve my OT. It's an easy button for OT and IoT. They plug it in, and then the OT asset owners won't adopt it. They won't use it. They were not considered as part of the process or involved in talking about what the issues are. And so there can be political challenges and in teams that have not typically worked together between OT and IT over the years.
So what's your approach then working with the people to getting them all on the board? And now we've all worked, and James and I have talked to people that are very OT centric and maybe have been working with specific industrial controls for years and years and very, very sensitive to anybody touching them or anybody doing anything that won't allow business to move forward the way it's supposed to. So then what's your approach then to being able to get people all on board?
Yeah, so we do like workshop style meetings, whether we're doing a service or not. So when we start meeting with the client, what we'll do is we'll have our PM team. We have a project manager on every every service we do, essentially every project we do. We work with our PMs to essentially coordinate times to meet individually with each team, because even on IT, you have your security, of course, You know, you got firewalls in OT and IT. You got your architecture. You still have switches and routers, you know, and wireless devices to, you know, connect all these devices. You have your identity teams. You have server teams, you know, for virtualization. So you have multiple IT teams, and then you have to figure out, well, who owns the assets? Who's going to be affected by any new process or technology? You know, who's going to answer the phone when there is that alert in your SIEM, or your SOC gets an alert about an OT device or an OT network? You know, does the asset owner even know that you're going to be calling them at 2 a.m. when you see an alert, right? Or an anomaly in OT. So really getting everybody on the same page. We meet with each team individually, hear their concerns, because while IT is concerned about confidentiality and then integrity and availability, OT is reversed, or, you know, flipped. So, and availability is highest priority, like you mentioned, Mike. You know, getting that product out the door with high quality, efficiency, but availability also means safety. So if you're going to, you know, push a system or deploy a technology into OT, if it's going to, you know, risk the safety of their people or the safety of their equipment, you're going to be hard pressed to get that technology implemented.
Has that have you seen that kind of resistance cause, you know, technologies to fail in the past? As in, hey, this seems like a great fit, it could solve a problem that the OT team has, but because it introduces too much change, they ultimately just decide, hey, we're not going to do it, even if we think the outcome might be worth, you know, the effort. Has that happened often in your experience?
Yeah, not really the change. It's really the way it's introduced to those teams. So if you know, whoever, IT director, CISO, whoever says, oh, we need to do intrusion detection in our OT environment. You know, IT security is inheriting the security of that traffic. However, they don't own the asset. So if they come in and tell OT, hey, we're going to do this, and don't get their input, then that's where we see a tool not get implemented, not get fully used, and then the company does not get value. If they don't get value out of the tool, they're no longer going to pay for the tool. So it's more that. So when we get teams on the same page and everybody's input on the roadmap, and because you have to compromise, right? You know, if you get ransomware in IT, I pick on accountants a lot. So if an accountant gets ransomware on their computer, IT is going to shut them down. They're going to, you know, unplug the NIC. They're going to, you know, shut off the operating system, whatever. So the accountant loses availability to do their job in order to protect confidentiality of the data and not to lose data, right? So in OT, you know, if you have a nuclear facility, you know, and somebody gets ransomware, you're not going to shut off the systems keeping your nuclear core at a certain temperature, right? You know, because at that point, it could cause a meltdown and hurt a lot of people in a large, you know, radius of miles. So it's really more about the approach that we see. That's usually the issue, not so much the technology, because, you know, if OT understands what they're doing, these tools are safe. You know, when I was in manufacturing, and I think I talked to when I met with John Becky on one of these calls a few months ago, you know, when I started doing security, you know, Kali Linux didn't exist. It was Backtrack Linux back then and Boss. But, you know, I would accidentally, you know, cause issues on printers or you know, industrial control systems because, you know, you don't know what you don't know. It's like, hey, here's a new tool. I'm gonna scan the industrial controls network, and hey, PLC's reset, or a printer spitting out a bunch of junk and scaring people. So it's kind of hope that answers your question, James.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great point of view too, and I like that you talk about the concept that, you know, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability are flipped in the OT space, where it's like availability is king, and everything else kind of comes down from there. Such a different way to think about approaching, you know, solving problems in that space.
Yeah, just like with any relationship with, you know, and especially between OT and IT, it comes down to compromise, right? Because, you know, in my presentations I do at GuidePoint conferences or industry conferences, you know, I usually show two pictures. One picture is of a major highway, You got several lanes, think of your bandwidth, right, of your internet connections. You want, 10 gig, to all your closets and all your users to be able to stream March Madness in March, during, business hours. You want to keep all that running, right? So you're going down, 100 miles an hour. It's, trying to get as much traffic through there as fast as possible. Then you got your OT road, which is your backcountry road with all the potholes. The locals know where every pothole is. They know how fast to go around the corners. So if you come in trying to go 100 miles an hour like you do in IT, and you do this in OT, you're going to cause yourself problems, right? You're going to potentially crash and burn in OT if you don't listen to their concerns, right? It's like, hey, you might want to watch out for that pothole in turn 6, right? Whatever. So once you do that, you're like, oh, I need to listen to these people, not just force technology on top of their job, essentially.
Yeah,
it's a great analogy. Like that analogy. So if you get the people moving in the right direction, then what are the key processes that you end up focusing on that need to be changed in that kind of move from people first, then process? What are the key ones that you look at?
Yeah, the first one is we asked, do you have an incident response plan specific to your OT environments? Because, that's really the number one control from the SANS top 5 critical controls for industrial control systems is, there's never 100% secure, right? You may have had 0 vulnerabilities in your environment and then CrowdStrike happened, right? Sorry to pick on CrowdStrike, but, so you're never truly secure from your systems being taken down, right? Whether it's, and most successful attacks are, I say successful, like actually, caused outages or damages is insider attacks. And a lot of them are not malicious. They're accidents, right? We've had, when I was at the railcar company, we had 2 instances where our ERP system, which ran on Unix, was essentially wiped. It was a script that a contractor ran when they built the system, accidentally made it recurring annually. So a year of data was lost because of an accident, right? So there's things that, it's not always that hacker from some other country that's, writing code at 2 a.m. and, creating backdoors. That's not always the case. Yes, that gets news, gets publicity, but from the process perspective, essentially, it's going to take a good 3 to 5 year plan to build momentum, keep that momentum to maturing the security of your OT and IoT environments. But in that meantime, what are you going to do if that accountant gets ransomware? If you do not have proper segmentation right now between IT and OT, do you know what cables to unplug or ports to disable to ensure that does not spread to OT? With the current, maybe if you have flat networks or you don't have an industrial DMZ firewall. So who are you going to call? If you get an alert that, there's a virus plugged into a Windows-based HMI running Windows XP, it's spreading some virus across the network, who in OT are you going to call, right? Because your SOC will probably not have the authorization to start shutting off ports in OT, again, causing outages and could cause physical damage depending on the industry they're in. So having that OT incident response plan and then having specific playbooks for different scenarios in OT or IoT. So, and then we do that, again, we involve the people, we do OT tabletop exercises, different scenarios. That way, you cannot build your incident response plan when you have an incident, right? Because if you don't have a plan, you're essentially planning to fail. So and plans don't always go according to plan. Everybody has a great plan till you're punched in the face, essentially. So then you have to adapt. But if you're doing the exercises together between IT and OT, then you're who to call, and that person knows to answer the phone. Because if they get a call from help desk and they didn't know they were going to call, they probably won't answer, or they'll just hang up on them and not do it. Right? So that's kind of how we still involve the people, but that's where we really start, is because you're going to have incidences whether it's accidental, malicious, or not. You need to know how to respond as you mature your environment. And then those playbooks will change as you implement new processes and new technology. Your incident response plan will mature along with your environment.
Cool. Now, let's talk a little bit about ownership around xIoT security. Where have you seen over the time, like from your railcar time to today, what have you seen change? And I think from talking to you in the past, I think you've seen a bit with the change in the CISO role, but what have you seen overall change from an xIoT security ownership over time?
Yeah, over time, CISOs battled for a long time to get really respect at the board level, right? 20 years ago, or maybe 30 years ago, before there was really a true CISO role, once it started being implemented and companies started hiring for a true person to be CISO and not directly reporting to the CIO or IT director, once they got out of that kind of mindset, it still took CISOs a while to have that seat at the table, right? So now we're kind of doing the same thing with OT and IoT. However, CISOs are now inheriting essentially the security, and oftentimes for IoT, they inherit those assets as well, because it's very easy. Of course, printers. You think printers, IT typically, which would fall under your CISO role. We still see dot matrix printers out in production, but IT may or may not help with those. But like cameras. So it's usually pretty easy for a CISO or security team to work with your physical security team. If you have thousands of cameras all over the globe at your manufacturing facilities or your, electric or oil and gas, field locations, it's usually pretty easy to work on that, because again, those are not affecting production. But once you start putting xIoT or industrial IoT devices all over your OT, for different sensors of temperatures of a heat treating furnace, or sensors to determine if you're having a flood, because of a valve leak or something, right? So now we're putting all these sensors in there essentially to get better data to the front office to make better business decisions. So the CISO's effectively inheriting the security of all these devices, but not always the assets. So especially when it comes to OT, so like the PLCs and your RTUs and your sensors, a lot of those, your production and your that budget for those physical assets will come out of production or operations typically. But the CISO inherits the traffic and the behavior of these devices, especially if there's bad behavior going on. However, so that's where the real true challenge comes into play, is when a CISO inherits the security of an asset, but doesn't really own the asset itself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So what recommendations do you then have for CISOs? Then they come in there and they have no clue what they're supposed to do. They've inherited all of this. So what's the recommendations that you give to them?
Yeah, the first thing is, do you have a good asset inventory of the hardware and software? And typically it's depending on the environment. NERC CIP is for electric companies or utilities that produce and transmit and distribute electricity have to follow NERC CIP compliance, which is 12 years old and has matured in the last 12 years. So those clients are typically right on par with their asset inventory from a hardware and software and firmware perspective. And those are the companies or industries that we do a lot of the pen testing in, because they have the people, process, and technology in place to make pen testing valuable to them, right? So manufacturing, however, especially a private manufacturing company that has no regulations on the manufacturing side, may or may not have anything from an asset inventory. Maybe there was a vendor that installed something in the 90s and there's a bunch of handwritten, IPs and PLC numbers, somewhere, or there's some, viral notebook somewhere that, the engineer that's been around 40 years, he knows where it's at and can tell you the IP. But, that doesn't scale well, right? Especially if you have 10 or 20 or 100 sites globally. So that's where, we start with the asset discovery and using tools like Phosphorus to help help essentially do asset discovery in a safe manner for OT and IoT devices, and then be able to build that asset inventory per location and even down to the manufacturing line. That way the CISO, because you can't protect something if you don't know you have it in your network, right? So
yeah,
that's again, incident response plan for process. And when we start talking technology, asset inventory is first, is really the next question. Do you have an asset inventory?
very cool. And of course, that's an area where Phosphorus excels and can help those CISOs get that information, we like to say. All right, Patrick, this has been fantastic. Our time went by really, really quick, but I really have enjoyed your insights. James, any other final questions that you have?
No, nothing other than just appreciate you taking the time. I know we worked together a little bit here in the field lately, and so our partnership is very valued, and your input's always awesome. So it's great. It's been great to hear from you and get your point of view on all of this. And I look forward to more of it in the future.
Yeah. Really enjoy working with you too, James, especially out in the field helping our clients.
Yeah.
So we have one silly question for you, just what we ask our people come in. Of course, you're from this area, but since our headquarters are in Nashville, we all love Nashville hot chicken sandwiches. So from where you live, what's your favorite regional specialty that you like to go for?
So for Memphis, and still true today, it's got to be the barbecue. Like it's,
Yeah.
I'm not a huge Texas brisket fan, so I love Memphis barbecue, and I also like Kansas City barbecue. A little bit sweeter taste, but yeah, I'm kind of halfway, I guess, between Memphis and Kansas City now. So definitely enjoyed the barbecue at both of those regional areas.
Nice. Do you barbecue yourself?
I would never cook myself. No. Sorry, Mike.
That's a good. I got to figure out how. Yeah,
no,
I have to word
I'm
that differently next time.
I'm not much of a cook, so no, I'll cook a duck or goose, from hunting or something. But no, I've never actually attempted to barbecue ribs or any of that. I do like to eat it though.
Me too. I'll have to make our way to Memphis and join you for some barbecue. So thank you again, Patrick. Really enjoyed having you on the show. So everybody there, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we have a special Phosphorus Live hosted by our CEO, Chris Ruland, and our CISO, John Terrell, at a show we call Factory Takeover, Exploiting and Securing OT, ICS, and Industrial and Manufacturing Environments. You're going to get to see how some of the devices there can actually be exploited. Should be a lot of fun. As for us, the following week is Thanksgiving, so we won't be back here on this show until December 12th. So until then, everybody stay secure. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.
See you guys.
Yeah.